President Trump is vacationing today at his estate in Florida, but his mind is on North Korea. This morning, the president took to Twitter writing, "Caught red-handed, very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go into North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korea problem if this continues to happen."
This all comes as President Trump has been putting pressure on China for nearly a year to cut ties with North Korea over its nuclear program. But earlier today, China said they did not break any sanctions with oil sales to their southern neighbor. Joining us now from Washington is Sabrina Siddiqui. She is a CBSN political contributor and a political reporter for The Guardian. Sabrina, the president's pressure on China since taking office doesn't appear to be working. So what options does he have here?
Well, I think that the Trump administration has insisted that it would like to pursue a diplomatic solution with respect to tensions in North Korea, even as they have escalated. And it's the president who, time and again, has displayed more fiery rhetoric, certainly through his Twitter account. We saw another example of that today. I think one thing that's notable about this report is it originated from a South Korean newspaper that there were illicit sales between Chinese and North Korean vessels. As you mentioned, China has denied those reports, but it was widely picked up by Fox News. And so, of course, as the president, you expect that that Trump was briefed on any classified information if there was, in fact, a violation. But he seems to often get his information from Fox News and then to promote that on his very powerful and influential Twitter account. So this is another example where he's sort of governing in 140 characters or less. It's not exactly clear what his plan is with respect to actually responding to China or North Korea.
And Sabrina, switching from foreign to domestic, there's a lot on the president's, of course, domestic agenda for 2018. What are some of the top priorities for his administration right off the bat in the new year?
Well, I think that Republicans and the president are very encouraged by the passage of tax reform. They believe it gives them something to run on in the 2018 midterm elections. But there's a lot that this president has yet to accomplish. Certainly, the administration would like to still try and repeal and replace Obamacare. They did deliver the health care law, a critical blow by repealing the individual mandate as part of the tax reform bill. But they certainly want to go further than that. The president also still wants to see his wall built along the U.S.-Mexico border. There's other, with respect to his immigration agenda, changes that he has promoted, such as slashing legal immigration. I don't think he has the votes to do that, even in a Republican-controlled Congress. But there's an infrastructure plan that we still have yet to see that he campaigned on. It's not clear, of course, in a midterm election, with a lot of the partisan politics that tend to be at play, what he will be able to accomplish. But I think that certainly tax reform is all that he has been able to do in his first year, and there's a lot more yet to be done.
And he's, of course, going to need a strong GOP team. The president will host Speaker Paul Ryan and Senator Mitch McConnell at Camp David in early January. We know this trio hasn't always been in lockstep. Are they all on the same page going into the new year?
I think that the relations were certainly strengthened through the tax reform process. It was important for Republicans that the president held a series of events across the country promoting the tax reform bill. He certainly showed more engagement and ownership of the issue than he did with health care. And that had, of course, been difficult for them in their efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare, that they didn't even have the confidence of the president as they were pursuing different options. But, of course, there are frictions. This is a president who continues to attack incumbent Republicans, people like John McCain, Jeff Flake. There are a number of Bob Corker. There are a number of individuals who are well respected in Washington, and he continues to engage in high-profile feuds with some of those prominent Republicans. So I think it's always going to be somewhat tense because he's an unpredictable president, and you never know when he might turn around and blame Republicans once again if he fails to fulfill aspects of his agenda.
And, of course, we're all looking at what he's going to do next year in the lens of the 2018 midterms. That's going to be something looming over whatever legislation they want passed. Of course, the president's touting his tax bill and, of course, executive orders and laws that he's signed. But what kind of role will the president himself play in those midterms next year? Are people going to be running against the president for a congressional seat?
Well, Democrats certainly plan to make this election a referendum on the Trump presidency. And I think that they want to tie every Republican candidate to the president's agenda, as well as some of the more controversial aspects of his tenure thus far. But I think that for Republicans, it really will depend on the districts. And if there are more competitive districts, they might try to distance themselves from Trump, recognizing that they need more moderate-leaning voters. I think think if they're in reliably conservative states, then it would certainly be beneficial still to have the president campaign for them. But he is suffering from historically low approval ratings. And as you saw in the Alabama special election, while we can't take too many conclusions from a special election, even in a state where he won by roughly 30 points, Trump's approval rating was divided in the exit polls from that race. So it's not entirely clear if he's going to be a liability even in conservative states. And I think the strategies will really differ depending on which part of the country we're talking about.
And Sabrina, one last follow-up. Doug Jones' win in Alabama means Republicans only have a one-seat majority in the Senate, 51-49, but of course the vice president cast that tie-breaking vote. How much more challenging is it going to be for Republicans, especially in the Senate, to get legislation coming up in 2018? Especially, how many times are we going to possibly see the vice president voting on legislation?
I think we might see the vice president have to play more of a prominent role. You'll recall that the failure to repeal and replace Obamacare was in part because they could not get to even a simple majority in the Senate. And that was when Republicans were able to afford to lose 2 votes. I think now they're going to be in a position where they can only afford to lose 1. And that's the scenario in which Vice President Mike Pence would cast a tie-breaking vote. So it not only makes it more difficult to pass legislation, but it also gives a lot of the senators more influence and more power to extract concessions from leadership and to make demands throughout these processes, which, as we know, always tends to make things a little bit more complicated. So I think Republicans are mindful that it's going to be a lot more difficult. And you mentioned that a lot of Trump's agenda thus far has been through executive order. I think we might see many more of those, especially in an election year when he wants something for him and Republicans to be able to run on.
Sabrina Siddiqui in Washington, D.C. Have a happy new year, and thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.